Good morning. I'll try to do my Jerry Rappo imitation. It's my great pleasure today to introduce John Oyler. John was a co-worker with the Duro group that's part of our membership. John has had multiple careers. He's in his third one at least. He spent some 40 years in industry, a lot of it working with us on Neville Island. We built some big machines, and John led us in the technical aspects of that. For instance, iron ore stacker reclaimers were, from John's memory, 212 foot long. That's most of a football field to reach out and dig up iron ore and feed the Pittsburgh steel mills or coal plants. But those days have kind of gone, and John moved on at his retirement to the University of Pittsburgh, where he has a 20-year outstanding career teaching civil engineering to the students over there. He's received several awards, and I'll read this so I get them right. He won the 2020 Distinguished Service Award from the Pennsylvania Society of Professional Engineers, and another for contributions to the Pitt engineering teaching program. John also established the Oyler Graduate Fellowship for students in civil engineering. And then he retired from there and returned to Bridgeville, where he writes a weekly column on history. And he also collects bricks. I don't know how the bricks fit in, but I couldn't resist putting that in. At any rate, I would like to introduce John Oyler. Welcome, John.
Glad to be here. Gee, this is wonderful. There might even be somebody in here older than I am. Unusual to be in that situation. I thank Earl for this opportunity. What I'm going to talk about today is out of this book. This is called Engineering Pittsburgh. 2018, the American Society of Civil Engineers Pittsburgh section celebrated its 100th birthday. And as part of that, we put together this book, which chronicles the infrastructure, the civil engineering achievements in this area from the early days till now. And I did a chapter on railroads and also one on buildings. And it seems to me that this building thing is a pretty good opportunity for us to I got another gimmick I need. Time out. Aha. Magic joystick. Opportunity for us to trace the development of Pittsburgh, Western Pennsylvania. So we're going to do it by talking about buildings, and if things work well and I push the correct button, we'll advance it. There we go. Middle button advances it. Hurrah. You know, one of the secrets of being an effective public speaker is getting the audience on your side. And usually it helps to be an old fumbling old fool. Everybody feels sorry for you. So you can appreciate that. Okay, here's the book, Engineering Pittsburgh. You can buy it at Barnes & Noble for 22 bucks. It really is an excellent book. Okay, here we begin. Long before there were civil engineers, there were military engineers. It's not surprising that the first project in this area was Fort Pitt. Fort Pitt was built in 1759, following Forbes' campaign when they chased the French and the Indians out. And it was built under the responsibility of Captain Harry Gordon. He was the first engineer builder in this area, and he built it in accordance with military handbooks. And it's a wonderful
The one above that.
How about that? It's a wonderful pentagon with bastions at each corner. This is the flag bastion. That's where the Fort Pitt Museum is today. If you go to the Fort Pitt Museum, you can see this diorama. And at its time, this was the biggest military fortification in North America. Unfortunately, it's all gone except for the blockhouse. The blockhouse was built in 1765 following Pontiac's rebellion. At that point, they decided they needed strong points, and they built 4 blockhouses, masonry, slits in the wall so you could shoot through them. This one has survived thanks to the Daughters of the American Revolution. 1764, oldest building in Pittsburgh. Second oldest, the Neal Log House. You don't even know this exists. This is in Shenley Park on the golf course. And William Neal was the architect, engineer, and construction for building that. 1765, and it's still in very good shape. Old Stone Tavern, Pittsburgh's West End. This was built in 1782. Charles Elliott was the man that built it. He was a big businessman in this area, had operated the ferry across the Ohio River at the West End. And this building has been the subject of a lot of controversy recently. It was to be torn down. A group of people got together and opposed it. And the good news is last November, a family purchased it and plans to renovate it and open it again as a tavern. So that's a win for us preservationists. The Neville House in Collier Township is a big win. It has been for many years. After the Nevilles, well, after we burned down Bower Hill, and John Neville said, I don't want to live in the South Hills anymore, he came to purchase Montour Island, middle of the Ohio River, changed the name to Neville Island. But he left behind his son Presley in what's now Woodville, Collier Township. And this house is beautifully preserved. Let's see, Sunday is the first day this year that it'll be open to the public. Some sunny Sundays, well worth your while. Drive over, stop at the Neville Experience. This used to be called Neville Plantation, but the woke generation has frightened us, and we're not allowed to call the plantation anymore for fear we will offend people who had descended from slavery. So now it's known as the Neville Experience, but wonderful place. And we just built a new barn there last year using timbers from a 200-year-old barn that was torn down near Ligonier. And the leftover timbers were used to build a log cabin, which is brand new there. So another good place to go. This is John Wood's house. This is in Hazelwood. Still exists. And another good story. This has recently been renovated, and somebody's got a brewery pub in it. So another wonderful old building that has survived. Okay, now fast forward 1836, the Burke Building, and that was Mr. Chislett. John Chislett was an architect trained in England. He came to Pittsburgh in 1833, and he built this three-story building, which is right adjacent to PPG, and it is the oldest commercial building in Pittsburgh, and it's famous for surviving the fire of 45. 1845, we had our version of the Chicago fire, and it was really a disaster, and it destroyed probably 2/3 of what was Pittsburgh at that time. Took a while to rebuild afterwards. Along came the Civil War, but in 1872, Trinity Episcopal Cathedral was constructed on the same site there had been two earlier Episcopalian churches. This is on 6th Avenue downtown, across the street from the Duquesne Club. And it's relevant because the steeple, 200 feet high, is recorded as being the first tall building in Pittsburgh, 200 feet tall. And 1888, Henry Hobson Richardson came along and built the wonderful courthouse with its tower. And that tower is 250 feet above ground. And it's actually built, talk about sustainability and environmental stuff. That was built with intakes up in the tower to have a stack effect and pull the hot air out and exhaust it. And this is pink Milford granite. Where's Rich Fedosic? He was talking about stones and rocks. Pink Milford granite, Romanesque structure, Beaux-Art. The style, oh, I'm wrong. Richardson studied at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. That's where he learned his trade. And we're all proud of the courthouse. Actually, in to show how important, how significant it was. We have this wonderful old painting of a steamboat coming into the Monongahela House, and you can see how the courthouse tower towered over everything. All right, let's flash back 3 years to 1885 and something happening in Chicago. And this is William LeBaron Jenney, very interesting gentleman. He studied in Paris as well at the École Centrale, Paris. One of his friends there was Gustave Eiffel, and came back here in time to join the Army, served under Grant and Sherman as an engineering officer in the Civil War. After the war, he started an architectural firm in Chicago and produced the original skyscraper. This is considered the first skyscraper, 138 feet high, home insurance building in Chicago. While he was planning this building, it was intended to be constructed of wrought iron. Andrew Carnegie had just imported Bessemer conversion and was making a brand new product here in Pittsburgh called steel. Andrew was as good a salesman as he was an innovator. He went to Chicago, met with Mr. Jenney, and explained to him the advantages of building a building of steel rather than wrought iron, including cost. And Jenney accepted it, and indeed the home insurance building was constructed of steel. So this is really the first, not only the first skyscraper, it's the first steel building. Well, Carnegie liked the idea. He says, I'm going to have my own steel building here in Pittsburgh. And he hired Jenney to design it for him. And they did indeed build the Carnegie building. You should all remember it. It used to be next door to Kaufman's on Fifth Avenue. It was torn down to expand Kaufman's and let Cherry Way sneak through beside, unfortunately. So it was demolished. That's the Carnegie building. The Park building, similar appearance, was constructed also on Fifth Avenue, 351 Fifth Avenue. The architect was George Post. 15 stories, 199 feet high, and it is Beaux-Arts style. I don't know what Beaux-Arts is, but this is Beaux-Arts style. And this still exists. This is still on Fifth Avenue, about halfway down on the other side between Smithfield and Wood. Then came the Frick building. And now we got to talk about Henry Clay Frick. If we did a poll in here, you'd probably all say he was a bad guy. You know, we've been taught Henry Clay Frick was a robber baron, and he was the villain of the Pinkerton strike, and all those bad things. He was actually, he had started a coke business in Connellsville. Carnegie needed coke to make steel, make iron actually, And he bought the Frick Company, and he got Henry Clay with it. And for a while they got along. Actually, Frick was chairman of the board of Carnegie Steel when they built U.S. Steel. And then they had a falling out and didn't get along. And by 1902, Frick didn't care much for Carnegie, and he told his architect, who was Burnham. Oh, okay. Daniel Burnham was a pupil of Jenny. He had worked for Jenny in his architectural firm in Chicago, and then Daniel Burnham came here and did a lot of important buildings. And he told Burnham, I want a tall building. I want it to be the tallest in the city. And I want it built so that Carnegie's building is always in its shadow. And they did. He built it adjacent to it, and Carnegie's building always in the shadow. And initially it was 20 stories high and the tallest in the city. And along came the removal of Grant's Hill. When we lowered Grant Street 11 feet, and suddenly he had a 21-story building. And suddenly the basement became the entrance and so forth. And the Frick building's still there. It's a fine building. And while we think he was a bad guy, take a look at this. This is St. Peter's Episcopal Church. Before the Frick building was built, this church was on Grant Street. And when H.K. Frick decided to build his skyscraper, he had this church dismantled, stone by stone, every stone marked, moved out Forbes to Forbes and Craft, the corner of Forbes and Craft, and rebuilt. And they threw the thing up, and the building was like brand new there. And 15 years ago, Carlow College tore down, put up an ugly science building in its place. Now, you tell me, who's the good guys, who's the bad guys? Yeah, the fact that Frick did that, I think is remarkable. Okay. Next building in town was the Arrett Building. This is on Liberty Avenue. It's actually right across the street from One Oliver Plaza, where I ended up working after I got thrown out of Neville Island and transferred downtown. Just a nice old building. It's a historical landmark. This one should be a historical landmark, and it isn't. This is the Penrose Building. This is between 16th and 17th Street in the Strip. And it is important because in 1906, we built this tall building of reinforced concrete, unheard of at that time. This is one of the oldest reinforced concrete buildings anywhere. And it's still in existence. It's now, like everything else in the Strip, it's being converted for expensive apartments. Penrose Building. Farmers Bank Building, 1910. Now took over the championship for being the tallest building in the city. This is 500 Wood Street. This is actually the northeast corner of 5th and Wood. The architect was Alden and Harlow, 27 stories. I don't know what style that was, but it was most famous for this mural. You remember this mural? The Penzer family bought the building, and Judy Penzer produced this marvelous 25-story mural. Mario Lemieux, Roberto Clemente, Joe Green, Jack Lambert, and of course Bill Mazeroski. Sad to state, the building was torn down. The mural disappeared. The worst thing about mural art is it's only as good as the survival of the building. Okay, Oliver Building, a new champion. This is on Smithfield Street, right across the street from Mellon Square. Burnham was the architect for this building, 25 stories, 347 feet high, and it took over the rank of being the tallest building in the city. And it's still there, and it's a very successful building today, the Oliver Building. I'm getting in your way, aren't I? I'm sorry, I apologize. Give me a kick. Okay. Fast backward 3 years. First National Bank Building. Very attractive bank building on the northwest corner of 5th and Wood, right across the street from the Farmers Bank building. Yeah, nice, good-looking building. Who cares? Why do I have this picture of this little piddling little building in a talk like this? This is why. 3 years later, Burnham came along and added everything above it. And suddenly this became the tallest building in the city, the First National Bank building. And it was only a few feet taller. This is the Farmers Bank building, and this is the First National. We're just a few feet taller, I think 3 or 4 feet taller than the other one. And interesting, the construction firm that built this was the James L. Stewart Company. And Mellon then bought into that, turned it into Mellon Stewart. This was demolished in '69 to build one PNC Plaza. Okay, this is the top of the Union Trust Building. Union Trust Building is up on Grant Street. It isn't as tall as these other ones, but it has this remarkable roof with a very ornate architecture here, and these two little chapels sitting up here. There is an urban legend that we tore down St. Paul's Cathedral, was on that site, and that they cut a deal with the Lord or the Pope or the devil and said, in return for this, we'll build these two chapels on the roof. Can't prove that. Turns out right now all they are is that houses the two elevator shaft. But they're gorgeous, really. All right. 1929, now we had a new era of tall building construction. And it began with the Grant Building up on Grant Street, which is Art Deco. And I'm still not sure what that means. I have a hunch that Art Deco, one of the characteristics is the fact that it tapers as it goes up. Not sure. But it's a distinctive building, and it also has this wonderful beacon at the top, which blinks out in Morse code, Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh. Okay, who knows Morse code? What is Morse code for, what's P?
Dash, dot.
Right.
Dash, dot, dot, dash, I believe.
It's dot, dash, dash, dot. Yeah, that's correct. And I is dot, dot, and T is dash, dash, dot, dot, dash. And it still does. Except, what, 15 years ago, some high school, some Boy Scout learning Morse code checked it out, and it wasn't saying Pittsburgh at all. It was like Joe Beefsteak in yes, sir.
I have a comment to make about that. Morse
Please.
code. Back in the early days of aviation, when air navigation was very rudiment, they used a system of light lines. And that identified Pittsburgh, and these visual pilots would go from light line to light line, and that was the identifier for Pittsburgh.
Huh.
Another one was up in Butler at
Okay.
Grant Airport.
Okay.
And I don't remember what the identifier of that was, but that was all replaced with the succession of aerial navigation methods over the years.
Uh-huh. Okay. Well, the Grant Bill was a big thing when I was a kid, certainly. That's where KDKA radio was and everything else. Okay. What do we know about the Grant Building other than that? Well, it was the tallest at the time. Henry Hornbostel was the architect for that, and it was built by the Dwight P. Robinson Company building, whoever they are. And they say this was a flurry of activity. 29, we built the Coppers building up on Grant Street, and it was the headquarters for Coppers Corporation. The architect was Graham Anderson, Probst and White, who actually was the successor to Daniel Burnham. By now, Burnham had died. These were his proteges. And it also is Art Deco. And the distinctive feature, of course, is this tent, green tent sitting up on top of it. Then came our beloved cathedral. This is a long story. I wish we had time to go through it, but Pitt originally was downtown. Then they were on Observatory Hill on the north side. Then they moved out to Oakland and were occupying property up the hill from O'Hara Street. And at that point, they had a massive competition. What's our new campus going to look like? Hornbostel won the competition, and he wanted to build a series of classical style buildings on the hillside with the Acropolis at the top. And they actually built 3 of them so far. Along came Chancellor Bowman. He said, I don't like this design. I want something inspiring. I want something that will motivate young people to reach for the heavens. And they had another competition, and the winner was Charles Clowder, K-L-A-U-D-E-R. And he conceived what is today the Cathedral of Learning. He hired a structural engineer to do the steel frame for it, Homer Balcom. Homer Balcom had just completed the Empire State Building. And Balcom designed this. Stone and Webster actually did the construction work on it. A man named Blakesley was the superintendent for that. And of course, this is the finished product. And I don't know, where's Ray Coper? He keeps bugging me about being a Penn Stater, and I am. But, you know, I dearly love the cathedral. This is, in my mind, a perfect building. Regardless of what angle you look at it, it's different. It's not the most efficient building in the world, but it is certainly a great achievement. And it, in its time, was the tallest. And immediately along came the Gulf Building, which took over that role, also Art Deco. Now we're up to 582 feet. Trowbridge and Livingston were the architects, except in brackets with Edward P. Mellon. The Mellon family were behind building this. They had a nephew who was an architect. They always found a way to get him involved. McClintock Marshall was a structural engineer for it, and Mellon Stewart was the general contractor. And originally, the neat feature was the fact that the tower was blue. Let's see, how did this go? When it was blinking, it was getting warmer. And it wasn't blinking, it was getting colder, and blue was clearer and red was rain. But then they've added wind velocity and something else, and it's a crazy thing now, except now, when a pirate hits a home run at PNC Park, or the Steelers score a touchdown, or the Penguins score a goal, they have this kaleidoscope of color flashing over there. And apparently, there's somebody sitting in the lobby listening to the ball game, triggering this. I don't know. It sounds like a pretty good job. Anyway, but it's a neat building. 525, okay, that was 32. Nothing happened during the Depression or the war. After the war, the Mellons built 525 William Penn Place to be the headquarters for U.S. Steel. And Steel did indeed take over floors 9 through 37. I don't know, who was the architect for that? Harrison and Abramovitz. Turner Construction built it. Mellon money again. One of the curious things about this building, there was a tunnel from its basement to the bottom of the Union Trust building and across the street to B&W Mellon. Right now, you can travel underground there. And in the basement of this building, there's a vehicular turntable. So you drive your truck in, empty it, drive back out. So 525. Next came Alcoa. wanting to push aluminum as a construction material. They built this steel frame building with an aluminum facade. Again, Harrison and Bramovitz were the architects. The Fuller Company was the general contractor. They could prove a point. The facade was much lighter, much thinner. This was a practical surface for a building, and it has survived pretty well down through the years. The style of this is kind of like upright diner. It kind of, some respects, that's what it looks like. So, okay, now, my beloved Civic Arena, which was built in '61. Ray, what time did you come to Drouot?
64.
Okay. I can tell the story then, and I can't be contradicted. I'm working for Engineering Works Division, and one of our major products, with bulk material handling equipment, had heavy trucks that we used to move the machines, actually moved on these self-propelled trucks. When we heard about this thing and the fact that the roof would open and the leaves for the roof would be supported on these trucks, oh man, we're going to build those trucks. And we worked up a proposal. Bob Hiller was the plant engineer, which is a big title, had no indicator, was inversely proportional to his ability as an engineer. And he was convinced this would never work and we would be embarrassed. And he persuaded our general manager, Bob Harmon, we weren't allowed to bid on it. So we didn't get the bid on it. Insult to injury, Highland Patterson, who really weren't in our league at all, were successful. They got the order, they built the trucks worked fine. Years later, my wife and I had season tickets for the Penguin games in F-15, over the goal, the Pens shoot on twice. And every time we climbed the steps and went by these trucks, I would shake my head. Now, really, that was a big disappointment. IBM Building 63. IBM is now on the verge of introducing us to the world of computers. And they want to have an office here in Pittsburgh that's a signature office. They contacted the firm of Worthington, Skilling, Hell, and Jackson, which was really John Skilling. And so we want something special. He said, well, we got this young guy in New York, Les Robertson. He wants to do a building with no interior columns, stressed skin, and we'll put him on it. And they came up with this design, which looks like a bunch of diamonds. It's really just a bunch of diagonals intersecting. Impossible to analyze. Robertson did it with 24 analysts and hand calculator or mechanical calculators using Hardy Cross moment distribution, and huge success. The bridge company constructed it, and they were so pleased with it that eventually it led to the steel company building their own building. Prior to that, we threw up One Oliver Plaza, which is now the K.L. Gates building, where I ended up working. And we built Three Rivers Stadium. This is what it looked like for baseball. This is what it looked like for football. How did we change it? We moved the stands on trucks with hoists and cables. And by then, we had the courage of our conviction. We did indeed provide those. And worked very well. Very proud of that. Steel building, Robertson then designed the steel building. Remarkable structure, easily the tallest, will be forever. What's special about it? The main thing is 38,000 square feet of floor space, no posts, 840 feet above the ground. No other building in the world can say that. All these skinny little needles that they're building in Asia, once they get up that high, they don't have anything worthwhile.
What was it known for?
Pardon me?
What was it known for? It's called the rusty building.
Rusty nail.
Yeah, rusty nail.
Okay, just as Alcoa covered its building with aluminum to sell it, U.S. Steel was
Corten steel.
Corten, weathering steel. They had developed weathering steel that doesn't have to be painted. And they bet this huge building on that. And it's never been painted. And also, the columns are hollow and full of water for fire protection. Were any of you lucky enough to ever eat in the restaurant at the top? You know, wouldn't it be wonderful if that were back? Yeah, wonderful place, yeah.
Stouffer's. There's a Stouffer's restaurant.
Pardon me?
Stouffer's owned it. It was called.
Stouffer's, yeah, top of the tower, wasn't it? Top of the triangle, yeah. And we had to get together and start a new restaurant. Put it back up there. One PNC Plaza replaced First National Bank. Two PNC Plaza, which is a pair of octagons tied together. We closed down Oliver to build that. And you can see, looks like here, this is the Gates building, 1 PNC, 2, 3, and this is the EQT Plaza, which we haven't got to yet. 1 Oxford Center, 4 octagons tied together up on Grant Street. Beautiful PPG place. Philip Johnson was the architect. Robertson, again, was the engineer for this. Fifth Avenue Place. This is Hillman money. They wanted to build a building 616 feet tall. The planners wouldn't allow it because it would upset the symmetry leading up to the steel building. And so they built 438 feet and put this penthouse on top and the post on top of that. So that this is a foot taller, I guess, than the Oxford Center. My kids have always called this the Daily Planet. It does look like it should be in the comic book. Maybe it's Gotham City Hall. I don't know, but it needs the bat signal somehow. Here's EQT Plaza, which I think is a really stupid, strange-looking building. I don't know what style it is. They stuck this arch on the top somehow to echo the bridges. I don't know. Architects, who knows? And the saddest of all, in the 70s, DeVoe Corporation was the third biggest engineering construction firm in the world. Bechtel, 45,000 employees. Fluor, 30,000 employees. DeVoe, 15,000 employees. Brand D, 14.9, 14.8. We were barely third. We were third, and our management had a big head. We're going to have our own building. We're going to be the chief tenant in this new building up on Grand Street. And actually, I was involved in planning our move from One Oliver Plaza in here. And I had an office picked out right there. Then everything went haywire. We backed out of the contract. BNY Mellon took over. We're supposed to believe that the transition from U.S. Steel to UPMC is a good thing, and that the transition from DeVoe Corporation to a bank is a good thing. I'm not so sure.
I was an officer at the bank, known bank. My office is on the 48th floor, and I looked out on the arena.
Yeah.
And watched that open.
Oh, yeah.
It took about an hour and a half, I think.
Oh, yeah.
To watch.
Yeah.
It was just a curiosity, yeah.
Well, my office was going to look right at Conley Vocational. But, so,
our Neville Island office was going to move down there. We had 2 floors completely designed for us, and we were delighted when the whole thing got canceled.
yeah.
We didn't want to leave Neville Island.
Okay, I'm almost done. This is a timeline, tallest buildings, and it's incorrect in that the sequence of those 3 is questionable. And it's really, when do you define a building as completed? Each of these 3 buildings claims to have been the tallest when it was completed. So I put them all in. But Cathedral, Courthouse, Farmers Bank, Oliver Building, first Coppers, down to the Steel Building. And this is a gorgeous 3D Google satellite view. And you can see all these. Here is the Steel Building. Here's Mountain Tower, or NBI Mellon, Grant Building. Here's the new, did I skip over that one? That was the new PNC building at the southeast corner of Wood and Fifth, which is highly energy efficient. And when you look at this skyline, you can see the logic of limiting this thing so that it does all kind of build up to the top of the Steel Building. And finally, here are the 16 tallest buildings in order. It's an impressive collection. And I think the story of how this all happened is a pretty good record of our engineering heritage. Thank you.
Any questions for John? Okay, you got your money's worth? John, thank you for coming. We enjoyed it. Have a good day.